And it is time once again for another AEW Dynamite review here on the Mr. Warren Hayes Show. Hi, I'm Warren. Welcome, everyone, where we talk about the weekly episode of Dynamite that occurred just last night, because I record these on the Thursdays. Today is September 4th, 2025. So therefore, we're going to be talking about the September 3rd edition of Dynamite, which occurred, of course, in the 2300 Arena over there in Philly. Continuing the residency, week 2 of the residency, another full house for the Dynamite residency. Good. There's really nothing to add. They should be putting easily 916 people into buildings. Like, this should not even be a challenge. So, thankfully, it is happening. I feel like this is one of these reviews. All right. This is one of these reviews where I am going to start talking, where I have my notes. I'm all set up. I'm ready to go. And I'm going to start talking about it. And then I will give you the vibe, really, of how I felt about the show. Because as it stands right now, I think, like, overall, like, I think the wrestling was very good. I think this was a very good show for the in-ring wrestling, which is why you should be watching wrestling in the first place. And then I feel like the angles, the stories, the promos, everything sort of kind of weighed things down. I don't know. Like, I don't know how to feel. And I slept on this, right? I went to bed last night sort of thinking about it and going, thinking about it. It's not something that kept me up all night. But I'm thinking about it in relation to today, where I'm putting my notes together last night. I'm like, okay, well, how am I going to tackle this? How am I going to approach this? I don't even know exactly how I feel about the show. I would say that it was a good show, because I think the wrestling was top class. I really, really do think that. Maybe the rest around it was a little heavy-handed. I don't know how to feel about it. Like, I legitimately do not know how to feel about the show overall. So let's figure it out together. Like, I stopped putting brain power into it and try to say, well, how are we going to tackle this today, Warren? And said, no, listen, this is the way we're going to tackle it. We're just gonna do it. We're gonna talk our way through it. We're gonna improvise. Well, we're not gonna improvise because I have my notes. But we're gonna talk our way through it, and we're gonna figure it out together. We're gonna figure it out in real time. How about that? So, and the show starts in a way, I think that sort of really defines how conflicted I feel, I guess, because I'm not sure I like the start. Okay, starts off with a promo, but we get into some action real quickly. And that, to me, is kind of an upgrade from all the past weeks of Dynamite, where we've been starting with in-ring promos and so on. So I appreciate them getting to the business end of things very quickly. And it starts with Gabe Kidd coming out on the microphone, and he's calling out Darby Allin, and Darby ends up ambushing him, and they start brawling. They start biting. Bounce back lariats against the barricades and whatnot. We get coffin drops onto the floor. Like, it's a good, exciting opening segment, right? Then Wheeler Yuta shows up to interfere, and then Darby under the ring has his skateboard, laced with tacks in the back, and he takes Wheeler out, and he does an ollie off he does a dive, right? It's not exactly an ollie. No, he does it. Well, yeah. Anyway, he dives off the. I'm not going to pretend like I'm up to date on my skater parlance here. I will sound like a complete poser. But Darby jumps off the top rope with the skateboard, lands on Yuta's back, exposing the thumbtacks, and Wheeler gets a back full of thumbtacks. Then Jon Moxley shows up, then Claudio and Marina Shafir, and then the lights go out in the 2300 arena, and I'm like, it's Sabu. That would have been That would have been big news. That would have been huge news if Sabu had showed up. But no, it was Hook coming out, and he comes. He sort of starts to walk to the ring, and then Samoa Joe and Powerhouse Hobbs show up. They sort of run past them. We'd address this later on, and I'm glad they did. And then even Willow Nightingale shows up to beat up on Shafir. Then they're fighting against each other. Then we get Darby and Gabe Kidd, who end up fighting all the way to the back, and Darby chloroforms. Well, that's what we're assuming, right? With the rag, with the ether, he ethers Gabe Kidd and puts him in a body bag, and the body bag is already tied up to the back of a pickup truck. So it was all a ruse all along. It was all a plan all along. And then Darby speeds up with Gabe Kidd and the body bag being dragged behind the pickup truck. And that's how this segment concludes. So, okay. Things that I liked. Look, I'm a sucker for the brawls. I like multi-person brawls. I like, when people start hitting each other and tossing each other around in these big schmozzes. I like it. That's good. You even throw in Willow Nightingale in this to come and take care of business as far as Marina Shafir is concerned. That's all good. Like I think all of that is very good. Where I start to have issues is how it all came together. I don't know what the ops still have to do with this. I don't know what. I thought the ops were done with the Death Riders. Clearly not. And well, I mean, I say clearly not. This is not just a thing that happened today. This is a thing that's been happening for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, where they just show up when the Death Riders are showing up. Like, okay, let's have a blow off. Let's do something. Let's have a match. I'm trying to think just off the top of my head, and I could be wrong. And I'm sure in the chat, and not in the chat because we're not doing this live, but in the comments, you will point out to me, if I'm wrong here. But I feel like since the Samoa Joe Jon Moxley match in the cage, there hasn't really been like Ops versus Death Riders, like team matches, multi-person matches. Like we at some point there's got to be some type of resolution that comes across here. Are they teasing this? Are they keeping this alive? Under the pretext that the Death Riders are going to take back the trios titles. Okay, maybe they want to continue the trios feud. I don't know, but there's got to be some clarity here, because it's like, oh, it's the ops again, and you don't feel a payoff. Like, you don't feel like Claudio or Wheeler are invested in this. You feel like they're invested in other things. Like Wheeler, you feel that Wheeler's more invested in Chris Statlander than anything else he's doing. Mox is, he's invested in Darby right now. Was this a way to add a little spice to the, Hook and the ops maybe having some tension there? Maybe, but it's all. I'm not seeing the connective threads here. And I'm not seeing anything on top of that that's making me excited for more Death Riders ops. There's nothing here where I'm like, oh, well, like, what's the next step? All we've been doing is the ops showing up to serve as backup for other people who are in feuds with the Death Riders. But it feels like the Death Riders are giving them like no time of day. Like, there's nothing happening. So I don't know. A Hook coming out is I guess a little out of nowhere. But he has to get physical. Like, I understand his ideas. He's the cool guy. He's unbothered and whatnot. But if you're coming in for a save, Jesus Christ, don't stroll to the ring. I understand that his new music, which I like, isn't necessarily conducive to a big explosive run-in. Well, then either don't play the music, which makes it more credible, or change the music. You know, but I like the song. I legitimately like the song. I don't know. The execution here was half and half. The parts that, and Willow is back fighting Marina Shafir. Is there going to be any resolution on that front? Because I kind of feel like Willow right now, she's entangled with the Chris Statlander stuff. You know what? Maybe this is the thread we're looking for here. You remember a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about how I feel AEW booking is not being handled with as much care anymore. I think this is a little example here, right? Because on top of that, listen, I like Darby. I like Darby Allin as much as the next person, but I think the chloroforming is a little goofy. I think stuffing guys in body bags and dragging them off is a little goofy. Like, I think it's all a little goofy. Like, I think it's going a little too far. Now we're sort of getting into, sports entertainment type environments, and I'm not into it as much. Now I think it's going a little too far. Now I think we're trying to stretch it. And look, I'm in agreement with a lot of people who say, don't do angles with cars. We don't need cars. Whether you're smashing a car or driving away in a car, or just don't do cars. You want to have people. Do you insist on having people arrive at the arena in a car, like in a limousine, and you insist on shooting them coming out of the car? Well, then do your little car angle and enjoy it, right? But I don't give a shit about cars. I don't. It's not. It's not something I feel that adds anything of value to the feuds that we're watching, where everything should just be settled with fights, with in-rings. And, it's like when Jack Perry had his bus, when he had his school bus. I don't really care, about him, and, and especially since, the bus led to some really terrible angles at the same time. I don't feel like there's the care. I don't feel the care is there. I feel we're just like slapping ideas together week after week. And I think we sort of feel that lack of care as well, or at least you can perceive it because AEW is kind of back to announcing all its matches on the same day as Dynamite, or at least most of them. You'll maybe have one match announced, but then everything else is slow. It's announced the same day or the evening before, and that feels a little slapdash. That feels like we're going back to eras which aren't necessarily exciting. Look, there was a time where we were making fun of Excalibur because he was running through the entire card for next Dynamite, right? And he'd have to do it like within a 20-second period, and he'd just be, going through it, just talking fast through it. And most of us were like, man, this is silly. Give him time to breathe or whatnot. But when you think about it, that was also an era where things are really well booked. And if you're able to sit down and demonstrate that you have been booking, that your booking is done with care, then you're able to demonstrate it by saying, yeah, next week we have all of this planned because we have a plan for our booking. Does that make sense? I think it should make sense because it's pretty basic. I don't know. I'm not feeling as great about how the booking is going as I was just a couple of months ago, just a month ago, just 2 months ago, 3 months ago. I'm not feeling as confident about it. I'm not saying it stinks. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it's not the same level of care. and we're going and then if this ship isn't righted, then I think, we're going to see bigger cracks start to form, and we're going to see worse things than what we're seeing right now. Because, if you wanted to tell me, Warren, you're screaming at clouds right now, that things are not terrible right now. They're not. And I don't want them to get terrible, which is why I'm raising a flag right now, which is why I'm sort of raising my hand, rising above the swarms of fans who are just like happy with everything and going, yeah, you know what? I'm not really excited about what's going on right now. I'm not quite sure that from a creative standpoint, we're really in a truly well thought out, well put together era right now, or vibe, or whatever you want to call it. Because there have been circumstances in AEW where it has not been that great. And when it's great, it's great. And it connects like it did, like it did from the Owen Hart tournament this year right up to All In Texas. I think that was impeccable pieces of booking. I thought it was tremendous, well thought out, well put together, everything just connected. Now I feel like it's a little more slapdash, And once again, I raise the question, could this possibly be due to the fact that Tony Khan is going to split more of his duties now that the NFL is returning? He did talk about this, he did talk about this a few months ago. I know I'm repeating myself. Don't get me wrong. I just want to make sure everything is clear. He did talk about this a few months ago where he's like, look, I'm back. And we're going to get things, if you like the booking right now, that's not essentially what he said, but I'm back booking. And if you like the booking right now, it's because I'm back, because I can spend more time on this. I'm not split between the NFL and doing this. We'll see how it goes. But I should, if we wrap up this first segment, I should like this segment first, more than I do. I should, but there's too many things. I don't know. Mercedes Moné retained the TBS championship by defeating Alex Windsor. I like this match. I thought it was a good, rugged match, as in unpolished, as in this did not feel, choreographed or, everything broken down meticulously where everyone knows, like it was rough around the edges. And it worked. It really did feel like these women were struggling to get the upper hand on the other, and they weren't looking for glamour or glitzy moves. They just wanted to bash the other one down. They wanted to get the upper hand, and I can appreciate that. Don't get me wrong. Which is why I like this match very much. Like, there's things that happen in this match where I'm like, well, I see what you're doing, but it's kind of sloppy, but it kind of works. I'll give you a very good example. When Alex Windsor is doing the sharpshooter thing, she does the sharpshooter, and the one she does it when she and she locks the sharpshooter on Mercedes, and they roll to the floor, right? And I'm like, I like those kind of moves. I like those spots, I should say, when wrestlers roll out and they hold on to their moves, to their submission holds. I like that. I think that's cool. And they fall to the floor, but Windsor loses the sharpshooter itself, right? So like she, the intricate leg twisty stuff, she doesn't have it anymore. She's flat on her back when she should be standing up. So instead, she just leans back and pulls back on both of Mercedes' ankles, right? But she, not really in a move. She sort of has a leg lock in, but it's not really secure and whatnot. So I look at that and I'm kind of like, okay, I saw what you wanted to do, but it didn't work out, did it? But it didn't work out, and it's fine because this whole match has kind of been like, it's not pristine. These are like, we know Mercedes, and I've said it before, one of her, she's not, a tightly executed pro wrestler. That's not what she is. And her matches get sloppy, but in a good way. And Alex Windsor is like, she's rough and tumble. I think she's very good, but I don't think she's also a wrestler that is about pristine execution of all moves. So you put these two together, you get, a rugged match, an unpolished match, and it worked. And I really liked it. I thought it was a very good TV defense for Mercedes. I enjoyed it. And they continued this story where Alex Windsor could have Mercedes' number with the sharpshooter. They told that story at Forbidden Door, and they told it again here, where later on in the match, she actually has Mercedes in a sharpshooter on the floor, and Mercedes is tapping, but Ref Aubrey is like, yeah, she's tapping, but she's not in the ring. I can't end the match. You can't win on the floor like that. So I really like this idea that Alex Windsor somehow has Mercedes' number, but Mercedes somehow continues to be able to evade being stuck in a sharpshooter and losing her title to her. I think the fact that they did it twice is a very interesting story to tell. And as a fan, you go, you just, of course, Alex, gets her in the sharpshooter and she's tapping. And of course it works out, but it doesn't work because circumstances, because I think at Forbidden Door, Mercedes wasn't legal, right? That was no. What was the thing at Forbidden Door? What was the thing? Or am I misremembering? Was it not at Forbidden Door? There was a moment Mercedes was tapping, but it wasn't legal. Maybe it was in a tag team match. I think it was in a tag team match, right? Yeah. It was in the lead up. It was in a tag team match. Not at Forbidden Door per se, because it was a four-way and then, anything goes. No, that's right. It wasn't at Forbidden Door. It was in a tag team match. And Mercedes wasn't legal. Now they're on the floor. So, you're like, maybe the third time, maybe the next time Alex Windsor gets into the ring with Mercedes, maybe she'll have figured it out and we'll make sure that the sharpshooter gets locked in the ring. And what does that do? Well, it gives a little extra oomph to a potential third match down the road, especially for the title. Then you're like, you know what? It's an easy story to tell afterward in the buildup. If I'm AEW and I'm booking a third match, or at least a second singles match, I should say, because they've had multiple matches, but a second singles match between Mercedes and Alex, then I'm telling the story of the sharpshooter. That's how I'm building it. And it keeps everyone on their toes, and finally you're creating a situation where people might be actually convinced that Mercedes might lose the match. I know this was a little convoluted because I was going back thinking about stuff and misremembering things, as I am wont to do. But the point here that I'm making is that if they wanted to rematch Alex Windsor and Mercedes Moné because of how they've been telling the sharpshooter story over the past couple of weeks, that would be an easy way to build the match and tell the story and get it exciting and make people get into the match as well. That's what I'm saying. Anyway, Mercedes eventually, Alex is trying to bounce off the ropes while she's in the bank statement to get out of the move, to get out of the bank statement essentially, and counter Mercedes into a pin. But Mercedes counters all of that into a backslide pin and sneaks one out on Alex Windsor. So, they've established, look, you want to talk about someone who looks better coming out of a little feud than when she went in, it's Alex Windsor. Alex Windsor because you're going to hear this a lot regarding Mercedes Moné, right? You're going to hear a lot of this. But Alex Windsor, even though she was a stalwart of the British Indies, she has everything to prove still to AEW fans, and she has established herself very, very quickly, and because of the quality of her work, and AEW fans have taken to her, and I think by showing that she can mix it up with Mercedes Moné and actually potentially be in a position to defeat her, and then on top of that, lose to her in a squeak by win by Mercedes, just like a luck of the draw kind of pinfall instead of a definitive submission tap or a clean 1-2-3. There's something there to say that I think Alex Windsor comes out of all of this looking better than when she came in, and but the Mercedes hate club will tell you that no one is getting elevated in the meantime, that she has all of these titles, right? Right. After the match, of course, the big deal here, Windsor goes for a handshake after the match, but Mercedes fakes her out and attacks her, which leads to Riho coming in for the save. Riho, original, the first AEW World Women's World Champion, I should say, comes in out of nowhere, unannounced, gets a big reaction. She's back. Listen. If Triple H is out there causing issues and threatening AEW, you've only got one person to call. The real needle mover, the NXT killer, the Paul Levesque demoter, Riho. She's back. And frankly, this is a very interesting match. Look, Mercedes likes to fight the Japanese girls. She just likes to fight the Joshi girls. So this has all the makings of something that could be really good. I have no idea where Riho is at physically anymore. No idea. Do you? No, you don't. Because she hasn't been wrestling. She hasn't been around. She's been nursing injuries and whatnot. But this has the potential to be very good. I'm sure we're going to have Riho have some warm-up matches on the way to All Out, because they did make the match official, right? It'll be Mercedes versus Riho at All Out. So, we've got, a short amount of time, but we can still have some warm-up matches in the meantime, right? Then we'll be able to see exactly how this might go. But as it stands, I liked it. I thought it was a good surprise, and it's a good surprise for the AEW fans. For longtime AEW fans, Riho has always been, has always been very popular, or just at the center of tons of memes. It's a good return ultimately for AEW fans. Then we get Samoa Joe, Powerhouse Hobbs backstage with Hook, and Hook sort of confronts Joe, saying, why did you replace me while my body wasn't even cold yet? Because of the Joe basically, and Powerhouse Hobbs steps in because they've been affiliated before, and I'm glad they pointed that out. They used to be on Team Taz together. He says, brother, this isn't against you. I've always had your back. But Joe sort of hops in and says, look, we had to move on. Opportunity presented itself. You were not ready to go. So we had to make a choice. And Hobbs stepped up. That's all there is to it. Hook fires back, I don't need your help. And Joe says, well, you know what? One day you are going to need our help. And so there you go. So Hook is the loner. He's a loner. Promos are improving. The one thing that I still, that the injury made very, very unfortunate is that I still think that Hook working with Shibata, and especially with a guy like Joe, who knows how to get himself over on TV, would have been continued work on that front would have been a tremendous vehicle to get himself over and to learn things that then he can use once the ops thing falls apart. And right now, Hobbs is in that spot. And I think Hobbs he's been glowing since joining the Ops. Tony Khan sees Hook as a future star. That cannot even be questioned. He sees Hook as part of the future of the company. Is he ready to saddle in? Look, the kid's improving. He's gotten so much better. There's still a ways to go. He is not a finished product, but compare 2025 Hook to 2023 Hook or 2022 Hook. Completely different people. We get Ricochet and the Gates of Agony, the GOA, are cutting a promo. They all seem to be on the same level here. It's a promo against the Hurt Syndicate. And Ricochet and the Gates of Agony seem to be on the same level playing field. It's not just Ricochet talking down to these guys or taking all of the mic time and treating the other guys like his underlings. Like they even have like a little hand signal now. They're doing all, and the other guys cut promos. I thought Toa Liona was quite good in the short burst promo that he gave. I was like, oh, this guy is actually really good and could talk and could really be fucking menacing, and I'm into it. There might be some untapped stuff there. Anyway, so they're setting up a fight with the Hurt Syndicate, and then Mark Briscoe comes to the ring, and this is another one of these segments where I'm like, man, I was like, what are we doing here? Mark Briscoe comes out, basically says, this is hallowed ground. Came to this place. This is where I fell in love with pro wrestling. And then he calls out Kyle Fletcher for the TNT title, but he says Don Callis is making me jump through hoops. And then Don Callis comes out and he says, indeed, you're jumping through hoops. And to get to Kyle Fletcher, you're going to have to beat Konosuke Takeshita this Thursday on Collision. And Konosuke Takeshita comes out and I guess he's wearing Yuka Sakazaki's pants, except longer. What a look for old Take Soup here. But Briscoe's like, look, I'm in my gear. I want to fight tonight. So Don Callis offers him up Lance Archer. I don't know why this is so. It just felt a little heavy-handed. I get the idea of the angle. I understand what they were doing it, but I feel like we could have got to destination so much faster. It just felt really heavy-handed. In impromptu matches, unannounced matches. I'm like, come on, man. Again, this is what the other guys used to do. 6 years ago. They don't even do this anymore. Or do they? I don't know. I don't even watch the show. I shouldn't be pretending like I'm aware. I don't know what WWE does on the regular in their shows, but I kind of feel like we could do away with this regardless. Don't do what WWE does. Kind of thing. It's just like move on, do something else, right? Anyway, I can't complain because we got Mark Briscoe on TV. Mark Briscoe continuing to get on TV. I'm still waiting for the proper push. I'm still waiting for the real deal Mark Briscoe push here. And but look, regardless, we got the match with Lance Archer, which I thought was very good. I thought it was another very good, brutal match here on TV. Choke slams onto the apron and choke slams onto steel steps. And then Briscoe fights back. He does some redneck kung fu. He does an avalanche sunset flip powerbomb and wins with the froggy bow. And it's tremendous. And Lance Archer, did Lance Archer stuff. And he's a lower end guy. You don't expect him to win. He seems to be it'd be nice if Lance Archer got out there and squashed a dude once in a while. You know what I mean? If he got on TV and just beat up a dude once in a while, I think that would add to his presence, his mystique. But as it stands, it's more like, well, okay, it's Lance Archer. He's probably not going to win. And that's not necessarily what you want from your enforcer, your monster enforcer. You kind of want him to have some aura about him where it's like, oh, will Mark Briscoe be able to go to beat this guy? And, the match starts and you're like, oh, well, Briscoe has this. And that's not necessarily the vibe you want. Anyway, moving on Tony Storm has cuts a pre-tape promo, calling herself the most batshit bitch who's ever pissed in this sink, and she's basically is ready to invite. She's inviting anyone on the roster to step up and challenge her for the title. Harley Cameron and Chris Statlander are backstage, and they're doing the odd couple gimmick here. Where can they get, not necessarily can they get along, but look at how different they are, right? Look at how quirky and weird Harley is, and look at how stoic and level-headed Chris Statlander is. It's the odd couple. All right, it is what it is. However, Wheeler Yuta shows up, says, sort of poo-poos Harley away and says to Statlander, look, the Death Riders have your back. And she sort of shrugs it off. And it's all, again, very... maybe they're finally finding a direction to all of this. I thought we were done with the Death Rider stuff, because now Statlander seems to be back to being a babyface. So it seems clear now that she's not going to want to affiliate with the Death Riders. I think a couple of weeks ago, or a month ago, right? Few weeks ago, I think it would have been more interesting when Wheeler was talking with her backstage and sort of confronting her and saying, talking about the Death Riders and trying to sell her on the idea of the Death Riders. She was very much leaning towards being a heel a lot more than now. Now she's smiling. She's goofing off with Harley. It's a little strange now. And I think, like I said, a few weeks ago, I think you had an interesting angle, an interesting will they, won't they kind of thing. Now it doesn't feel like that. Or they do the complete swerve. It's like, oh, look, you thought she was going to be a baby face? Ha-ha! Fuck you! She's not a baby face. She's been a heel all along. Here she's aligned with the Death Riders now. She might not, look, her booking's getting better. She might not be, as I called out, she might not be the worst booked wrestler in AEW anymore, but not by much. We have some direction here, but we got to make sure that whatever we get Statlander into, it's the direction is clear. Brodito defeat Wheeler Yuta and Claudio Castagnoli to retain the AEW World Tag Team Championship. Another very good match. Fast-paced, power exchanges. You got interference from Marina Shafir and Jon Moxley in the match, but Darby Allin shows up to choke out Moxley, which allows the Brodito guys to do their big babyface comeback. Bandito wins with the 21 Plex on Wheeler Yuta. It's a good, solid TV title, TV defense for the tag team titles. It was fantastic. Just a lot of fun. And that's all you really want with your TV wrestling. You just want it to be good. You want it to be entertaining. And Brodito continues to be a really good tag team that has a lot of chemistry. They were paired up perfectly here. I have no issues. This was very, very, very good. Okada cuts a short interview in regards to Konosuke Takeshita, where essentially they're setting up the issues with Okada and Takeshita exactly what I said last week. What I felt it's like just two alpha males in the same group, and one thinks he's the alpha male, the other one thinks he's the alpha male, so they just can't, there's not enough room in this town for the both of us type of thing. So I'm into it. And if this leads to a match at All Out and Okada has his working boots on, holy shit, we are in for a treat. Hurt Syndicate cut a promo responding to Ricochet's promo from early on with the GOA and basically call him a whiner, and he's trying to ruin the GOA. And they accept the challenge to fight in Toronto. And MVP even said, "I'm going to lace up my boots and do it." So it's going to be a 6-person match. Copeland Adam Copeland comes to the ring, but he gets ambushed by FTR. They beat the piss out of him. And then Christian Cage comes in and he gets the piss beat out of him. And the whole brawl explodes. And a really good one. Nice, physical, vicious. The FTR guys are on point. And then, the Ring of, people come in to separate everyone. You've got people from Ring of Honor coming in. You've got Jordan Oliver showing up. And you got Adam Priest in here. While Dax Harwood is busted open. Adam Priest comes in and he takes a swing at Dax. And I'm like, oh, shit. What are we doing here? This is interesting because I like Adam Priest. But eventually they pull everyone apart and the dust settles. I think we go to commercial. When we come back, we get FTR backstage with Stoke. And they're cutting a promo basically, vowing to destroy Copeland and Cage. Look, this whole angle was terrific. I loved it. It was super effective. It was the kind of stuff that we needed. Perfect timing for this. Like, just after the past couple of weeks, just FTR coming in and being like vicious sons of bitches. And I think that's, you're adding to the grudge aspect of it. Where it's kind of like, oh, we're goofing on Stokely. Stokely takes a spear. Stokely takes an unprettier, or the kill switch or whatever. Now it's like, no, all right. Now we got to remind everyone that this is going to be a grudge match. That these are people who aren't supposed to really like each other. So I'm excited for this to see how this sort of wraps up next week as we get into the All In. I'm absolutely looking forward to it. Will wraps up over the next couple of shows. That's what I'm trying to say. But while they're cutting those at the end of their promo, they sort of like Adam Priest shows up and he wants to apologize, but Cash is having none of it, and he's really pissed off. And he's like, and I love this. He says, "Oh, you show up on TV once and suddenly you think you're someone around here?" I'm like, that's really cool. I like, the locker room dynamic. I like perfect stuff. And he says, "Find yourself a partner. We're fighting you on Collision. You and your partner." I'm like, this is really neat. A nice neat little angle for Adam Priest. Clearly, the Southern boys take a shine to each other, right? And again, I like Adam Priest. We'll see who his partner is. And we're going to have ourselves a match on Collision. I think this, it's not necessarily going to evolve into something huge here. We're going to stay focused on Cope and Cage, but it's nice. That's a fun little distraction on the way too, right? And then we had the main event, the All-Star 8-man tag team match where the Don Callis family duo of Kyle Fletcher and Josh Alexander alongside the Young Bucks defeat Hangman Adam Page, Kenny Omega, and Jet Speed. And it's exactly how you figured it would go. It was chaotic. A big finale party match. Just where everyone's doing all sorts of cool shit. There's stuff happening all the time. And in the meantime, we're establishing some really neat stories. And I'm thrilled that a lot of the North American audience now are starting to see value in having these multi-person tag matches, because they're starting to see how stories can be created within these matches that can then carry on into full-on feuds and angles moving forward. You had some little stuff happening between Kenny Omega and Josh Alexander. I don't know if that's ever going to come to fruition, but there was some stuff being established there between the two. Of course, Jet Speed and the Bucks, which is something that I think everyone would be excited to see as a tag team match. I think it would be incredible. But look, the Bucks are all over the place in this match again. They're shining. They just make these matches shine. They understand what they have to do here, and they're terrific. They're great. They're doing indie takers right and left, and Omega's landing some V triggers, and there's some cool spots where there was even a an elite reunion in the ring, despite guys being, on different sides. But you did have Omega, Page, and the Bucks in the ring, and that got a big reaction from the Philly crowd as well. And then you have this spot where Kyle Fletcher has a guy up into a tombstone. I can't remember who exactly. And you have Nick Jackson, who jumps off the rope to do an indie taker there, and then goes to the apron to do another indie taker with Matt, who had another guy in the tombstone position and did an indie taker onto the floor. Nick Jackson is ridiculous in all this stuff that he does. And then the match comes to an end when they single out Kevin Knight, they being the heels. He gets singled out by the Don Callis family. They dispatch the rest of the team, and he's left alone, eats an indie taker and the brain buster by Kyle Fletcher for the win. And I was like, oh, this is a pretty significant statement here that we're making for Kyle Fletcher getting the pin for his team. And then there's the post-match angle, which was terrific again, where the heels just they go after Hangman, and they go after Hangman big time. And Kenny Omega comes in and uses his body to shield Hangman from any extra punishment. But then Kenny gets attacked. And this all leads to an incredible spot where Fletcher lands the brainbuster off the apron through a table on the floor on Omega. And the heels then celebrate, and Kyle is tremendous. He's looking into the camera. He's screaming, he's dead, he's dead. Kenny, right? Killed Kenny. He's dead. Kenny's dead. And, but nonetheless, the whole angle was terrific. Everyone was so good in the final angle. And they do a stretcher job for Kenny Omega. Now, I have to ask the question. I have to ponder this question. Are we really in a spot right now where you should be writing, I should say, Kenny Omega off of television? Now, there's been just fan speculation and people scratching their heads, and myself, going, well, maybe Kenny Omega is more banged up than he lets on, right? Which is why, sure, he was added into a match at Forbidden Door, but it was in the cage match, so he didn't have to carry the match as Kenny Omega as he would if he were in a singles match, for instance. So maybe he's hurting a little more than we let on. Maybe he's not quite on top of things as people think he might be. And very recently, I think it was last week, on this very review, we were talking about, or was it on stream? It doesn't matter. Here on the channel, on the show, we were talking about how all of these injuries right now in AEW, right? Will Ospreay, Swerve Strickland being injured. These are top guys that you're taking out of the picture. These are top guys you're removing from the situation. So it's making me wonder. So I was like, well, a lot then rests on Page now, because Page becomes the guy. Because if Kenny Omega is, part-timing it still, there's going to be a lot from the babyface point of view. There's going to be a lot that's going to befall onto the Hangman. He's going to have to carry a lot here. But, they sort of keep Kenny in the loop, and I'm like, well, okay. I think it's a good move if Kenny can go. I think it's important that Kenny stays around because they need the star power. But now that they seem to be writing him off TV. And I can't help but think, is this a good thing? Of course, it's a good thing if he's banged up and still hurting. Sure. Are they going to bring him back in time for Forbidden Door and have him have a match with Kyle Fletcher? Or are we doing Hangman versus Kyle Fletcher? The point that I'm trying to make here is, hopefully, writing Kenny Omega off of television is a decision that is 100% motivated by health issues and not just trying to add heat on something. Because right now, I think this company, in with the status of people injured and out right now, I think they need a guy like Kenny Omega. They need Kenny Omega active on the roster. So I'm a little taken aback that it's like, oh no, this guy's being written off TV. He might be back next week. It might be one of these things where it's like, in story, he fights through the stretcher job injury, and that sort of creates issues for him down the road. Whatever, it's one of those things where you're just gonna have to shrug and see how it goes down. But look, I hope Kenny's okay. I hope if he needs time to get healthy, I hope he's able to find the time to do that and do get healthy again and come back even stronger. But again, if this is just a story to write Kenny off of TV to add heat to a match, I can't get behind that. I don't think that's a good idea. So look, we'll see how it all shakes out, because as it stands right now, we're going to wrap up today's review. Thank you everyone for watching. I appreciate it tremendously. Leave a like if you're watching this here on YouTube, or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or a 5-star rating on Spotify if you're listening to this on the audio side of things. If you're listening to this on Thursday, I will be back later tonight, I should say. Once I'm able to speak again, I will be streaming here on YouTube. So make sure you join the channel, you subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell gimmick to make sure you don't miss out on that. Otherwise, thank you everyone for listening. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Go watch some Randy Orton and get back to me. And I will see you next time.